My name is Benazir Bhutto. I'm the former Prime Minister of Pakistan, presently in opposition. Pakistan is the second largest Muslim country in the world, and I was the first woman elected as Prime Minister in a Muslim country. I'm also a mother, and I have three wonderful children and a loving husband. So I consider myself to be very lucky to have both my family and to have the larger community of the people who make up my country supporting me. Each individual has different phases in their life. There are good times and there are difficult times. I was passing through a very difficult time in my life, and I was in Norway. I was living in exile, and I met a Norwegian member of parliament. He began questioning me on the basis of press reports, and we got into a very heated argument. Suddenly he stopped and said, "You should join us in the fellowship. You should come and attend the National Prayer Breakfast." And I said, "What is that?" He said, "They're friends, they're people who get together, who pray together, and it'll help you." I was intrigued by the idea. I happened to be coming to Washington at the time, and I said, "Let me go and see what this is about." And I think that the Lord led me to the conference. I found such inner peace after attending it. I found that inner peace because each one of us needs other people. I found people who were willing to accept me, knowing they had read terrible things about me in the press. So I felt I was being accepted with unconditional love. This reminded me of the way God loves his creatures. He loves them unconditionally. And it's the way that parents love children. They love their children unconditionally. Somewhere we lose that unconditional love. And the importance of the fellowship is that it allows people to form friendships where they can love each other irrespective of race or religion or gender or country or politics. There's no division. It's a unity with the Lord uniting everyone together. Jesus reaches across all religions in the Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition. Jesus is, of course, important to the history of Judaism because he was born a Jew. Jesus is important to Christianity because he brought the message of Christianity. And Jesus is important to the Muslims because large parts of the Testament are in the holy book of the Muslims. So Jesus is my prophet, and Jesus unites me with people of other faiths. And I think it's so very important for each of us, while we have our own faiths, to realize that in Jesus Christ, we have someone who brings us together on a platform of love, as well as a platform of belief in one God. I come from South Asia, which is a region of the world described by the CIA as a dangerous place where a nuclear confrontation can take place. I think it's described as the most dangerous place in the world today. In this environment, it's very difficult for people from neighboring countries to get to know each other. When I attended the fellowship and arrived, I found that I could meet people who were my neighbors, and yet who I could not see and I could not know. There seemed to have been a curtain between us, but the fellowship drew that curtain apart, and I could meet, not for politics, but just to know each other, to know as friends, to share food, to share friendship. And I met parliamentarians, I met business people from India, from Sri Lanka, from Bangladesh. We were able to sit down and talk as human beings to each other, rather than as protagonists. And previously I'd found that I was very much bound by the political agenda rather than the human agenda. And it was very revealing for me that one could form friendships where one thought it was difficult to form friendships. I remember I had meeting the lady parliamentarians from India. I remember meeting some of their journalists, some of their politicians. I remember meeting from Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. And even though we could go to Bangladesh, somehow politics kept us apart. We were too busy with our own lives, running around. And the importance of reaching out, of sharing, of pausing for a moment in the rush of life to find our own humanity was so important. And I formed and found friends. I formed friendships and found friends that I think are enriching for me. But I think it's also going to be enriching for my region, because we began to talk to each other, know each other, and I hope this can impact in improved relations and less tension in South Asia. My family has been through a lot of suffering. My father was Prime Minister of Pakistan. His government was overthrown and he was hanged by a military dictator. I lost my two brothers. I've been in prison. My husband is in prison, and I've been bringing up three small children on my own. In these difficult times, I found that it's faith in God that has sustained me, that has given me the strength to continue. And I did not turn bitter because I believe in redemption. And I believe that this is just a phase we're passing on to. And the next kingdom, the kingdom of heaven, is waiting for us. And so I see this really as trials. And I often think that God said that God does not lay on us a burden that we cannot bear. And that has really helped sustain me. And I find there's so much wisdom in the words that we are taught in the holy books. And if only we had the time to go back and look. For example, we are told, love thy neighbor. And when I look upon that premise of love thy neighbor, and I think that as a country, how much have we done to love thy neighbor? So I think it's very important to join together in a fellowship which helps take us back to our own humanity by making us realize the importance of the Lord, and in discovering truths that were revealed but remain hidden only because we tend to rush about when we could pause and be together with friends. I'm often told that I'm a role model for other women, that I have achieved much in my life. I was the youngest elected prime minister in the world. I was the first woman to be elected in the Muslim world. I fought for democracy against military dictatorship. But I remember times when I was in prison. I remember times when people thought I would achieve nothing, when people thought I would be locked up and I would be forgotten and that my life would be redundant. And when I look back on my life and I see from where I came, from the prison, from the solitary confinement, from the difficulties when I didn't even know whether I would survive, I mean, just whether I would live. I look back on all this and I say, how did it happen? And I say, it was the miracle of prayer. I believe it was the miracle of prayer. And I tell people, do not lose faith. Keep your faith. If you keep your faith, at least for me, I found it my own personal way to survive and to become what people say is a role model. It wasn't me. It was the miracle of prayer. When I was growing up, I was brought up in a religious atmosphere. I had a religious scholar come to the house and he would teach me about the rituals of my religion. When I went to school, I went to a convent and I would see the nuns in the convent go through the rituals of prayer. Religion was a ritual to me. I was born in a religious family. I studied in a religious background, but it was very much a ritual for me until I went to prison. And when I went to prison, I didn't know whether I was going to live or die. And Initially, I remember when they closed the bars and I was inside, and the only company I had was cockroaches and insects, and I didn't know how to pass my time. I used to long to read a Newsweek or a Time magazine. I was allowed one paper. I'd read it from beginning to end, read the cartoons, do the puzzles, and I would say, how will I pass the time? How will I pass the time? They've taken my friends away from me. They've taken the shops away from me. They've taken the sky away from me, the green garden, the sound of the birds. I'm all alone in this terrible cell. How am I going to pass the time? And suddenly it came to me one day that they've taken away your friends and family, taken away nature from you, your familiar surroundings, but they can't take God away from you. God is always with you. And it was during that period of time that I turned to God and I prayed to God. I prayed to God to give me strength to see through the ordeal. I prayed to God to save my life. I didn't know whether I was going to live or die. And I feel that God did give me life, and that God gave me life for a purpose. And it was the purpose of helping end other people's sufferings, that I had to go through a suffering process in myself to understand what it meant. So prison was a turning point in my life. Prison changed prayer from a ritual, and I discovered God in a totally new way. And I feel it's so very important in life to have a perspective that can help us go through the different experiences that each one of us comes across. I sometimes think that it's in bad days that we remember God. And I just wish that people could find God in good days, and maybe they'd never have to see bad days. If I had 1,000 young Pakistanis sitting before me, I'd want them to have the good life. I'd want them to climb the pinnacle of success in whatever they were doing, whether it was a job or a home, in whatever pursuit they had, I'd want them to reach the pinnacle. And I'd say it's important to discover fellowship. I tell them it's important to discover friends, because first you make friends, and if you make friends and you have the relationships that are blessed by God, doors open. And before you know it, one door will lead to another door, and you will find that you are so much happier in yourself for the comfort that you have. I remember when I attended my national prayer breakfast, and I was told that Jesus Christ said that if there are two people, you have someone to help you when you fall down. If you're two people, you have someone to stand by you if you fall down. And I think having someone with you is so very important. And I would tell these young people, discover the fellowship, discover friends, and discover the truth of Jesus Christ.